Okay, so today we're going to tackle a question that you guys have been asking a lot. Vintage versus modern investing. So we got half the room going,
Hey, Billy, you wanted to trade your Blastoise for my Charizard? No, you know?
and then you got the other half of the rooms going,
Hey, Billy, do you want to trade your full art, fusion strike, textured, alternate art, super powered, ultra instinct Charizard for my Radiant?
So we're going to figure out which half of the room is right and which one's wrong. Or maybe they're both right. Or maybe they're both wrong. All right, let's get into it. Also, guys, stick around to the end of the episode because I'm going to give you today's pro tip of the day. Before we get into our discussion, let's actually start by defining what we would call vintage versus modern. So I thought about this a lot, and I'm going to pick a very distinct moment in the TCG timeline of when I want to, determine what's vintage and what's modern. And I'm going to take the break between black and white and X and Y. And there's certain reasons why I'm doing this. So number one, that's very close to about 10 years old. So we can say that, stuff that's over 10 years old or right at about that moment, that's pretty close to being vintage or kind of middle class, right? Because really in my mind, we could say there's like vintage, which would be everything Wizards of the Coast. And then there's like when the Pokemon Company took over. So that could be like the middle ground. And then there's like, X and Y and forward, that's more modern. But I think if we wanted to draw a line in the sand, I would say between black and white and X and Y is very fair. Black and white, that's anything that's 2013 and older, and then obviously X and Y base came out in early 2014, if I'm not mistaken. So let's talk about new and old blood entry points, right? So there's certain things that brought old dusters like me that brought them back into the hobby, and that was going to be, that's like X and Y, right? That brought me back. Even though I was still kind of there in black and white, I fully came back during X and Y. And one of the catalyst points for that was Pokemon Go. I never played Pokemon Go, but that started sparking my interest. I started seeing Pokemon come up in my feed a lot, and I was always looking at stuff on YouTube when it came to Pokemon. I followed certain YouTubers during that time, and I always kind of kept in touch in that way to see what was going on with the TCG. Obviously, the TCG, the game, it was so much simpler back in 1999, 2000s, right? And it's become like really complex now. So we touched on one thing, Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go brought a lot of people back to the hobby. A lot of new guys too, because it really bridged that gap from what a lot of people knew as Pokemon as a vintage TCG product, and it really gave it a contemporary feel by giving it, this virtual app and this really, really intuitive and deep game where you could travel out in the world and people were like crashing into each other, like they were rear-ending each other trying to get these Charizards that would drop in different parks and all that stuff. I mean, it was a crazy time if you guys remember. People there'd be hundreds of people that would go to certain spots that were getting, good Pokemon, I guess. Again, I didn't see the allure of what was going on because I didn't play the game. I was starting a family, just got married. I had a lot of other priorities that came before Pokemon Go. I didn't really connect on that level. But, obviously Pokemon Go is a sick game. I've seen it. I've messed around with it a little bit, but definitely, people are really invested into that game. I mean, you're talking about like career players that have really, really high level Pokemon and have, seen and done it all. So that brought a lot of people back in. Then there's XY Evolution. So a combination happened, right? Pokemon Go was in June of 2016. I don't know if it was on purpose or what, but a guy like me, and I'm sure a lot of people like you that were in the game for a long time, maybe you got out during Neo Destiny, maybe you got out right at, early on Jungle and Rocket, and it wasn't cool to do Pokemon anymore. They released XY Evolutions in November of 2016. XY Evolutions is the third or fourth reprint of base set, right? Because they've had other reprints of base set. We had base set first edition Shadowless, right? Then we have Shadowless. Then we have base set Unlimited. Then you have base set 2. Then you have Legendary Collection, which is another reprint of base set. So this is Pokemon's, fourth try at reprinting the base set of cards, which is probably the most nostalgic for a lot of people. And when they dropped XY Evolutions, oh my gosh, that took me from being on the sideline to put me in the game, coach. I am fully all in on Pokemon. And again, at the time, it was not profitable to collect, invest. You were really doing it just for the love of the game, for the love of collecting. Whatever kind of person you were, whether you were a Pokemon Go person that wanted to also have some physical cards, whether you were an old completionist collector type like me from back in the day, that now you got back into it, you have a little bit of money, because in 1999, who had money? We're all broke. Now you got some money and you're throwing it into this, really frivolous endeavor at the time is what I would call it, and it was just really a luxury item, and it still continues to be a luxury item, but it's a little bit different now, and we're going to talk about that. So that's November 2016. Still, there is a huge lull at this time. If you guys remember, brought a lot of people back into the game, but it's not like people are getting rich off of it left and right. You're just really, again, collecting for the love of it. Logan Paul opens his first edition booster box in October of 2020, right? So this is now where it makes the game profitable. It makes all of the collecting that you did from 2016 up until mid 2020. It makes you feel like you're making such good decisions because you're seeing all of these things that you bought, all these cards, all these sealed products that you bought, and now they're going for 5x, 10x, sometimes even 20x on some vintage stuff. I mean, it's absolutely insane. The streets are going crazy. It's jingle all the way. He got two. It is all in. It is insane, right? It's pure insanity. That coupled with all the lockdown nonsense that happened and stimulus money. I mean, there's money everywhere, right? It was just a perfect storm. It was a perfect storm. So that, I think, is important when we're setting up the conversation of should you invest in vintage or modern. So I wanted to talk about first what brought you into the TCG or brought you back or for the first time period. So let's first talk about vintage. Right now, vintage is going through a very interesting time. A lot of people see it as going through a downswing. So I think this idea of vintage being in a downswing is relative. It really depends on where you entered into vintage if you tried to invest in vintage, right? So what do I mean by that? Did you buy at the absolute hype and now obviously you feel it coming down? Did you buy back in 2017 like I did and you still see vintage as way up? An example of that is back when I re-entered the hobby in a big way, you could get practically any base set holo unlimited PSA 10 for $100. Any one of them. Choose the one. Charizards back then were selling for about $400 or $500, which was obscene in a PSA 10 back then. You could get any of the other starters, holos, any of the other ones for about $100. If you look at those cards now, base set Charizard is still selling for at or around $9,000 or $10,000. So you're still at 100x of if you bought one back then, right? Or whatever the math is. That's why it's really relative and it's really a perspective issue on when you entered into the hobby on if you're down on vintage or still up on vintage. So like for someone like me that was collecting back then, I still have so much stuff from back then that I got. I'm still at 5, 10, 20x in value. So I'm not feeling that same despair that other people are feeling when they entered in during the Logan Paul hype. And I feel terrible for all those people because it was a madhouse. It was a mad dash to grab anything and everything Pokemon. It didn't matter. Prices went right out the window. So that's one thing to take into consideration with vintage. It may feel like it's on a downswing, but it's still on an upswing from my point of view. It's correcting is what I would say. So another thing with vintage is, a lot of kids don't have the same emotional attachment to vintage. And I say kids loosely. Humans, despite age, that entered in during the Pokemon Go phase, and that was their first experience with Pokemon, they're going to look back at vintage holos and say, those are freaking boring. When you compare a vintage holo to an alternate art, a contemporary alternate art of today, you can't even do it. They're going to say, what is this? You have to use your hands. This is a baby's toy. I mean, they're not even going to be able to relate to that on that level. So I do take that into consideration. I would say it's a more niche market for high-end vintage holos. There's going to be a very finite select group of people that are, number one, going to be attached to that type of item. Number two, going to want it to collect it. And number three, are going to have the deep pockets to pay $7,000, $10,000 for a card. I mean, that's a lot of lettuce, in my opinion. So that's something to consider. And lastly, on vintage, my biggest advice to you guys is to really not chase everything in vintage. I would chase rarity and I would chase the pop report over anything else. Be very in tune with where PSA is on pop reports. If you don't know how to check that, just Google it. It'll show you how to do that, or you can YouTube it. You want to be chasing items, in my opinion, in a PSA 10, because that's the cream of the crop. That's the top of the top. Or a BGS 10, BGS 9.5, CGC 9 and up. You want to be chasing these cards in, the most pristine conditions that had the lowest pop reports. So, that's what I put my money in. When I go into vintage, I go for rarity. I go for shinies, gold stars, first editions, shadowless, whatever it may be. I try to get the most pristine copies of those cards, or I grade my own cards and try to luck box my way into a PSA 10 of one of those cards. That's really how you make your true value in vintage. So that's something to consider. All right, let's go into modern. So modern is very attractive for multiple reasons, and I'm going to explain to you why. Number one, it's the most obvious point. It is such a cheaper entry than vintage, right? Younger kids can relate so much more, right? Let's think of a dichotomy between vintage and modern. So with vintage, you would be essentially opening up, let's say, a $300 pack to pull a $20 holo. And those holos are going to be, they're never going to be younger than they are today, right? They're going to be 25 years or older or whatever it is. And sometimes they don't sell for a lot loose mint, right? And they have to be literally perfect for them to get a PSA 10. So you could essentially be opening up a really expensive pack for a very inexpensive holo. Let's look at the transverse side of that. You could open a modern pack for $7 and pull a $300 Moonbryon, I mean, there's a huge dichotomy there. So it really flips it on its head. So modern is more of a let's rip it to win it. You can open up all these packs and then you hit that one pack. I mean, how many $6 or $7 packs can you open profitably and hit that one card, that one $300 card, maybe two, depending on what the product is you're opening. Maybe you're opening up a bunch of blisters that have no RNG, right? So it's different than a booster box. If you hit that big card in a booster box, you're probably likely not going to get another big hit because it's controlled, right? The hits are controlled on some level or another. So that is something to take into consideration. And I hear a lot of people say that you can't invest in modern profitably, and I'm gonna disagree with that, and I'm gonna tell you why. If we're taking the example of everything modern, so X and Y and newer is, we'll say, uninvestable when it comes to sealed product. If you're buying that product at or under retail, and in some cases right now you can buy it under retail, you are buying it profitably. There is not one sealed, let's say, booster box from any set, any era, anywhere from XY forward. Take Steam Siege. Steam Siege is like the butthole of modern, right? Everyone dumps on Steam Siege. Look at the price of a booster box. If you bought a Steam Siege booster box back in the day for $80, $90, because that's what they were back then, they're still selling right now for what, $200, $250? That's my guess. I'm just off the top of my head. So we can't say that you can't invest in modern profitably. The cat was out of the bag in Sun and Moon, right? X and Y, people are starting to wake up. Sun and Moon, the cat's out of the bag. Everyone's grabbing everything, left and right? Obviously, there is something to be said about the Pokemon Company going to a made-to-order, so they're printing way more in Sword and Shield. There is something to be said about that. But people know what's going on in Sun and Moon. There are Sun and Moon booster boxes right now that are selling for 10x of retail, okay? We could look at Tag Team. We could look at, Cosmic Eclipse selling for 5x. So and 5x return within a few years. Ask any good investor or stock guy. That's going to be that's a good return. You're a savant. You're a connoisseur. You know exactly what you're doing in the market if you're getting 5x, 10x within a few years on whatever trades you're making, right? So we can't say that modern is not investable because it's just simply not true. That's going to be it for those ideas, guys. I know this is a very surface level view, but I just wanted to touch on this. Maybe we'll dive deeper into this in future episodes, but I wanted to kind of tackle the ideas of vintage and modern and what can and can't be done and what I do specifically, because I can't speak for everyone. You guys are your own people. Spend your money how you will. That's not my concern. I'll support you guys no matter what you do, but I want to give you guys the pro tip of the day, and that is going to be, don't forget to appreciate the cards. At the end of the day, guys, I always took the approach of buying what I loved, and honestly, it really comes down to, why are you buying this product? Like for me, I don't buy to flip and to make hard cash. I'm an investor because I buy and I realize my equity and I flip the product to trade for other product or to get into the newer sets. It's always a constant transfer of wealth and circulation of buying something good, letting it appreciate, and then trading it for new stuff and doing it over again. It's just a wash and repeat, and then you can end up with a sick collection, but you just have to build little by little. Okay, so just something to consider. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, guys, and I will see you on the next live or the next episode. Peace out, guys. Yo, what's up, guys? If you want to see a video that I think that you might like after watching what you just watched, click the button right here. And if you want to be one of those people that want to subscribe to the channel and see how far this rabbit hole goes, the button's right here. Do it!